Hi everyone, I hope things are going as well as they can be for you during all of this craziness. And I feel like I need to apologize for this last book only because it's a dystopian novel and it's really probably not what a lot of us would like to read right now given the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, when I chose this book last year, I had no idea this would be going on. But the book does raise some interesting questions that are really relevant to today, and I'm going to just highlight on some of those in this video for today. So rather than give you my interpretation of the book, I'm going to try to do what I do in class and just throw stuff out for you to think about. Of course, if we were able to discuss this together as a class, we'd have a much more productive discussion about the book because you all have different insights and ideas that are really valuable for us to hear and that spark our discussions. But just do the best we can. And I do want to remind you that at any point, if you want to have a Zoom session with other classmates or with just me, I'm happy to arrange that. Just gotta let me know. So I have week 13 discussion questions and the, for lack of a better term, lesson up on the screen. So I talked about this a little bit last week. There's more information just in general about the book itself and some terminology. So if you have any questions about any of this terminology after reading it and after listening to my video from last week, please let me know. But this is, again, a dystopian novel, and there are absolute features of Afrofuturism and eco-criticism present in the novel. So as you're reading this novel, think about how the novel fits into this category of dystopia, and also what about the novel falls into Afrofuturism and eco-criticism. And then at the bottom, some other themes: education, well, I just mentioned dystopia and utopia, disability, religion, race. There are others, but those are some that I just wanted to note. So as you're reading the book, to think about those. And the discussion questions that I have, these are designed to kind of take the place of the discussions that we have in class. So they're separate. You don't have to answer them. Originally, I designed them for you to answer by leaving comments. You don't have to now. If you want to, I will give you extra credit for leaving comments for these questions. But again, this is to help facilitate a discussion and to help you think more deeply about the book. So I have two versions of the book. So this is the newer copy, and this is the older copy. They are identical, really. The page numbering is the same. And what I want to show you is I'm going to actually change the view. So for the reader response assignment that you actually need to type out and submit to Laulima as a homework assignment that will count towards your grade, you need to answer these questions at the back of the book. So they're the reading group questions and topics for discussion. Some of them appear pretty long, but you don't necessarily have to write a really in-depth long answer. Maybe there are 10 questions total, so maybe a few of them you'll find more interesting and will want to write more, whereas others you'll give kind of a short answer. Given current situations, I did not put a page requirement on this assignment. So just as a reminder, and this is in the syllabus, this is the assignment for the reader response assignment in the syllabus that you need to complete and submit as a homework assignment. So if you take a look at the discussion questions for week 13, this covers chapters 1 through 10. The first question is to think about the format or the structure of the novel's genre, which is an epistolary novel. I think I mentioned that in last week's video. So it's written as a diary. Other times you'll see epistolary novels written as letters. Other versions could be like text messages. But think about, in this case, this book is written as a series of trees. What effect does this have overall on the plot and your appreciation or understanding of the book? And think about how it affects the passing of time, especially in the context of present and future, because this is written again as separate diary entries, and that's format for the entire book. Second question asks you to think a little bit about Los Angeles and California more broadly. And if you're unfamiliar with California, you can do the best you can here, but you can even think about Hawaii and think about if Hawaii were experiencing the type of situations described in Parable of the Sower. So with this in mind, do you think there are similarities with present-day Los Angeles, or not, or maybe some things are similar or not? So you can think about that. And then for 3, the role of religion is important in the book for different reasons. So our protagonist, Lauren, she has been raised a Baptist. Her father is a Baptist minister. She has rejected Christianity and has formed her own religion, which she calls Earthseed. So it's really important as you read the book to think about that. Each chapter begins with some verse from Lauren's religion, Earthseed. And the first is, all that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. And Lauren writes about this idea of God being changed in depth throughout the book. So that's important, and you need to think about that. Think about how this idea of God is changed in the overall context of this story and the characters within the story, and especially Lauren. And also especially the environment that is occurring in this novel, this dystopian novel. Also, the title of the book, of course, is Parable of the Sower. If you are unfamiliar with that parable in the book and the reader group questions, number 5 has a paraphrase of the Parable of the Sower. So you can read that, or if you have a Bible, or you can look up, but you need to understand the parable, and then, more importantly, think about the relationship between the parable and the novel. This novel is named after this particular parable. So as you're reading, think about how this parable applies to the novel, to the theme, to the characters. How does it tie in? Why is it important? It's very important in this novel. There's also about climate change and the environmental crisis brought upon by climate change. So think about the larger social effects in the novel related to this environmental crisis, and think about in what ways the novel forecasts current conversation about climate change and human responsibility or agency in global warming. So you should be looking for references to that throughout the novel. And then for number 5, think about race. How to treat race throughout this novel. How do racial identities, for example, intersect with other topics in the text, like gender, climate change, income inequality, sexuality, and disability? So think about that as you read. Of course, the person Lauren is a Black woman, and some of the other characters are not. So in the town, or not really a town, the walled community where Lauren lives in the first part of the novel, she mentions different things about race. So kind of to look for that in these first 85 pages. And then, of course, throughout the novel. And then, interestingly, in this book, Lauren suffers from something that's called hyperempathy. And basically, she can feel other people's physical pain. So if she sees someone in pain, she also experiences the same pain that they're feeling. So think about in these first 85 pages too, the incident with the dog, and Lauren shoots a dog. It's a feral dog. All dogs pretty much are feral in this novel. It's kind of something interesting to think about, and rereading dogs and thinking, wow, in this environment, which, you know, could happen fairly easily, dogs go feral and they're really vicious. So when Lauren shoots the dog, she experiences the dog's death, just as one specific example. So think about the deeper significance for this affliction, hyperempathy, and how it affects Lauren as a character in this novel. So I'm also going to point out a few highlights from the first 85 pages. I'm skipping over a lot of things that if we were in class, you know, we'd have more time to talk about. I don't want to make an hour and 15-minute long video and bore you all to death, but just again to throw out some parts in these 85 pages that I personally think you should, you know, pay more attention to. And of course, there are other parts that I'm sure you have had as well. And you want to make a note that when Earthseed is mentioned, Lauren's religion that she's creating, she mentions it, or she talks about it as the books of the living. So think about that distinction and why that's important, specifically of the living. And sorry, just bear with me. I have several pages marked in my book. On page 20, I wanted to, on page 20, I wanted to point out, this is, I think, the first reference to space exploration and colonization. So to think about that, which is, we could talk a lot about this idea of colonizing space. I right in my mind, Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep comes to mind, where there are androids on Earth mistaken for people because most humans have left Earth because it's been destroyed by humans. And these androids are enslaved and taken to Mars to actually be slaves for humans, the humans who have left Earth. And some of them get away and they go to Earth, and they have been given fake memories, and they believe they're real. They believe they're alive. They believe those memories are theirs. So it talks about the whole kind of ethical issue about creating an android and then enslaving that android. But you know, I just kind of got a little off topic. The book Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the movie Blade Runner, is based on that book. It's a great read if you have time during this pandemic to read, then I suggest that. Also on page 20, I think this is the first reference to Christopher Donner, who was a presidential candidate. Think about any similarities with Donner and Trump. There have been several articles written in the last years since Trump became president about similarities between this fictional character and Donald Trump. And this character's slogan is actually "Make America Great Again." So think about it, see if you see any parallels or not. I'll leave that up to just kind of think about as you read this book. On page 37, there's another reference to President-elect Donner's version of slavery, and also Richard Moss. Richard Moss is someone who lives in the walled community where Lauren lives. He has several wives who, in the description, he treats as slaves, his children too. And Butler makes the comparison of his type of slavery to President-elect Donner's slavery, and Donner does become president in this book. Donner wants to lift labor laws, you know, that protect people, that protect children, to boost the economy, so people would, you know, not have the same protection, would be worked longer hours, that kind of thing. So think about those comparisons. Just in general, think about the idea of slavery. The idea of slavery is mentioned ways throughout this book. So try to pick out those examples and think about the different types of slavery and how and why they're important to the book. On page 49, we find out that 3-year-old Amy Dunn died, and this affects Lauren deeply. Think about her relationship with Amy, overall Amy's character, and what Amy's character is meant to mean in this book, and why it affects Lauren so greatly. And on page 54 at the top of the page, there are references to climate change. So there are references to fire. Oh, this is, sorry. You're going to read about this drug that people use, and it has this strange effect, like people enjoy it more than sex. So they're lighting things on fire, and it's orgasmic for them to watch things burn. So right after that reference, she talks about tornadoes smashing the hell out of Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, 2 or 3 other states, 300 people dead so far, blizzard freezing the northern Midwest, killing even more people, New Jersey, measles epidemic killing people. So that's the first reference really to climate change, global warming. So there are other references throughout the book for those, and think about their significance. And then on the next page, well, no, not on the next page, but on page 56, Lauren talked about the past and holding on to the past and how that's dangerous, and the need for being sensible, planning ahead for the future. And she references the bubonic plague, 1918. So think about the plague and think about how that relates to COVID-19 and what's going on now in the world. Because she says that the survivors of the bubonic plague realized they could demand better pay for their work. A lot of things changed for the survivors. And then she says that after the plague, people actually realized that change could happen. Things could change, but it took this terrible mass on the death toll, in Europe and other parts of the world for people to realize the mistakes of the past and changes that were really needed. So think about that now. I know people in, you can just do a Google search or go on social media and you can find all kinds of articles written about the need for change now based from the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's see, also, and think about what kinds of needs specifically, what kind of changes specifically we need to make and why. And as you do that, you can think about what's going on in the novel too and try to tie those ideas together. On page 64, this just kind of stood out to me about acorns, talking about how most people didn't eat acorns in the country. They didn't have a tradition of eating them. They thought they were disgusting. But Lauren and her family make bread from acorns. And Native Americans in California and probably other places, but I'm from California, so I grew up with Chukchansi, Miwok, tribal members, and I remember playing as a kid when we'd get acorns and we'd grind them up. Where I grew up, there were large holes in big boulders where years past Native Americans had ground acorn and made an acorn mush. So you could think about, just in a larger context though, this idea of taking a food that wasn't really traditional or fashionable to people, but it's helping people survive. And think about that idea and what just about our culture, people in general. And On page 76, Lauren, she eavesdrops. She listens to her dad and her stepmom's conversations at night when parents think everyone's asleep. And her dad emphasizes this idea about surviving and living, regardless of what happens to him. His family needs to survive. And this is an important theme throughout the novel, and it's one that Lauren writes about in much detail, this idea of how one survives and what role religion has in that act of survival. So that's something to think about as you read the book. And then finally, on the next page, at the beginning of chapter 7, we're introduced to the idea of, well, we were introduced to it already, but Lauren specifically links her religion, Earthseed, to taking root among the stars. So possibly another leaving Earth. So think about that implication as you read, and so many other things to think about in these 85 pages. But I just pointed out a few, and like I said, I don't want this video to become too long. But I am, again, happy to set up a group chat anytime. You just gotta let me know. And happy reading. Thank you for your time.